King Philip's War was an armed conflict begun in 1675 between a group of indigenous peoples of the northeastern woodlands against the New England colonies and their indigenous allies. The hostilities took place during the Restoration years of the English Monarchy, following the bloody English Civil War and the execution of King Charles I, whose son, Charles II, vengefully and tirelessly searched for the men who had killed his father, a relentless search that reached all the way to the faraway shores of North America. Let's learn the fate of the fugitive English regicides on American soil.
King Philip's War. The years 1675 and 1676 were years of terrible experience for New England. The most dreadful of all the Indian outbreaks of that region, that known as King Philip's War, was raging, and hundreds of the inhabitants fell victim to the ruthless rage of their Indian foes. Whole villages perished, their inhabitants being slain on the spot or carried away captive for the more cruel fate of Indian vengeance. The province was in a state of terror, for none knew at what moment the terrible war whoop might sound, and the enemy be upon them with tomahawk and brand. Everywhere the whites were on the alert. To complete our narrative we must go back years in time to the date of 1649, to the year of the execution of Charles I of England. 59 signatures had been affixed to the death warrant of this royal criminal. A number of the signers afterwards paid the penalty of that day's work on the scaffold. We are concerned here with only 2 of them, Generals Whalley and Gough, who, after the death of Cromwell and the return of Charles II, fled for safety to New England, knowing well what would be their fate if found in their motherland. A third of the regicides, Colonel Dixwell, afterwards joined them in America, but his story is void of the romance which surrounded that of his associates. Whalley and Gough reached Boston in July 1660. The vessel that brought them brought also tidings that Charles II was on the throne. The fugitives were well received. They had stood high in the Commonwealth, brought letters of commendation from Puritan ministers in England, and hoped to dwell in peace in Cambridge, where they decided to fix their residence. But the month of November brought a new story to Boston. In the Act of Indemnity passed by Parliament, the names of Whalley and Gough were among those left out. They had played a part in the execution of the king, and to the regicides no mercy was to be shown. Their estates were confiscated, their lives declared forfeited. Any man who befriended them did so at his own peril. These tidings produced excitement and alarm in Boston. The Puritans of the colony were all warmly inclined towards their endangered guests. Some would have protected them at all hazards. Others felt inclined to help them to escape. A few thought it might be their duty to take them prisoners. The illustrious fugitives settled this difficulty by privately leaving Cambridge and making their way overland to New Haven. Here they were well received. In truth, the Reverend John Davenport, one of the founders of the colony, did not hesitate to speak to his congregation in their behalf. We quote from his bold and significant words, whose slightly masked meaning his hearers failed not to understand. "Withhold not countenance, entertainment, and protection from the people of God, whom men may call fools and fanatics. If any such come to you from other countries, as from France or England or any other place, be not forgetful to entertain strangers. Hide the outcasts, betray not him that wandereth. Let mine outcasts dwell with thee, Moab. Be thou a covert to them from the face of the spoiler." Mr. Davenport was not afraid to live up to the spirit of his words. For several weeks the regicides dwelt openly in his house. But meanwhile a proclamation from the king had reached Boston, ordering their arrest as traitors and murderers. News of its arrival was quickly received at New Haven. The fugitives, despite the sympathy of the people, were in imminent danger. Measures must be taken for their safety. They left New Haven and proceeded to Milford, where they showed themselves in public. But by night they covertly returned, and for more than a week lay hid in Mr. Davenport's cellar. This cellar is still in existence, and the place in it where the fugitives are said to have hidden may still be seen. But their danger soon grew more imminent. Peremptory orders came from England for their arrest. Governor Endicott felt obliged to act decisively. He gave commission to 2 young royalists who had recently come from England, empowering them to search through Massachusetts for the fugitives. Letters to the governors of the other colonies, requesting aid in their purpose, were also given them. These agents of the king at once started on their mission of death. They had no difficulty in tracing the fugitives to New Haven. One person went so far as to tell them that the men they sought were secreted in Mr. Davenport's house. Stopping at Guildford, they showed their warrant to Mr. Leete, the deputy governor, and demanded horses for their journey, and aid and power to search for and apprehend the fugitives. Deputy Leete had little heart for this task. He knew very well where the fugitives were, but managed to make such excuses and find so many reasons for delay that the agents who arrived on Saturday were detained until Sunday, and then, as this was Puritan New England, could not get away till Monday. Meanwhile, a secret messenger was on his way to New Haven to warn the fugitives of their danger. On hearing this startling news, they hastily removed from their hiding-place in Mr. Davenport's house, and were taken to a secluded mill 2 miles away. The royal messengers reached New Haven, and demanded the assistance of the authorities in their search. They failed to get it. Every obstacle was thrown in their way. They equally failed to find any trace of the fugitives, though the latter did not leave the immediate vicinity of the town. After 2 days at the mill, they were taken to a hiding-place at a spot called Hatchet Harbor, and soon afterwards, finding this place to be too exposed, they removed to a cavern-like covert in a heap of large stones, near the summit of West Rock, not far from the town. Here they remained in hiding for several months, being supplied with food from a lonely farmhouse in the neighborhood. The royal agents, finding their search fruitless and their efforts to get aid from the magistrates vexatiously baffled, at length returned to Boston, where they told a bitter story of the obstinate and pertinacious contempt of His Majesty's orders displayed by those New Haven worthies. The chase thus given up, the fugitives found shelter in a house in Milford, where they dwelt in seclusion for 2 years. But danger returned. The king demanded blood revenge for his father's death. Commissioners from England reached Boston, armed with extraordinary powers of search. The pursuit was renewed with greater energy than before. The fugitives, finding the danger imminent, and fearing to bring their protectors into trouble, returned to their cave. Here they lay for some time in security, while the surrounding country was being actively scoured by parties of search. On one occasion, when out of their place of shelter, they were so nearly overtaken that they only escaped by hiding under a bridge. This was what is known as Neck Bridge over Mill River. As they sat beneath it, they heard above them the hoof-beats of their pursuers' horses on the bridge. The sleuth-hounds of the law passed on without dreaming how nearly their victims had been within their reach. This was not the only narrow escape of the fugitives. Several times they were in imminent danger of capture, yet fortune always came to their aid. A day arrived in which the cave ceased to serve as a safe harbor of refuge. A party of Indians, hunting in the woods, discovered its lurking occupants. Fearing that the Indians might betray them to obtain the large reward offered, the fugitives felt it necessary to seek a new place of shelter. A promising plan was devised by their friends, who included all the pious Puritans of the colony. Leaving the vicinity of New Haven, and traveling by night only, the aged regicides made their way through many miles of forest to Hadley, then an outpost in the wilderness. Here the Reverend John Russell, who ministered to the spiritual wants of the inhabitants, gladly received and sheltered them. His house had been lately added to, and contained many rooms and closets. In doing this work, a hiding-place had been prepared for his expected guests. One of the closets in the garret had doors opening into 2 chambers, while its floorboards were so laid that they could be slipped aside and admit to a dark under-closet. From this there seems to have been a passageway to the cellar. With this provision for their retreat in case the house should be searched, Mr. Russell gave harbor to the hunted regicides, the secret of their presence being known only to his family and 1 or 2 of the most trusty inhabitants. The fugitives, happily for them, had no occasion to avail themselves of the concealed closet. Their place of hiding remained for years unsuspected. In time, the rigor of the search was given up, and for many years they remained here in safety, their secret being remarkably well kept. It was in 1664 that they reached Hadley. In 1676, when Colonel Gough so opportunely served the villages in their extremity, so little was it known that 2 strangers had dwelt for 12 years concealed in their midst, that some of the people, as we have said, decided that their rescuer must be an angel from heaven, in default of other explanation of his sudden appearance. There is little more to say about them. General Whalley died at Hadley, probably in the year of the Indian raid, and was buried in the cellar of Mr. Russell's house, his secret being kept even after his death. His bones have since been found there. As for General Gough, his place of exit from this earth is a mystery. Tradition says that he left Hadley, went westward towards Virginia, and vanished from human sight and knowledge. The place of his death and burial remains unknown. It may be said in conclusion that Colonel Dixwell joined his fellow regicides in Hadley in 1665. He had taken the name of Davids, and was not known to be in America, and was comparatively safe. He had no reason to hide, and dwelt in a retired part of the town, where his presence and intercourse doubtless went far to relieve the monotony of life of his fellows in exile. He afterwards lived many years in New Haven, where he spent much of his time in reading, history being his favorite subject, in walking in the neighboring groves, and in intercourse with the more cultivated inhabitants, the Reverend Mr. Pierpont being his intimate friend. He married twice while here, and at his death left a wife and 2 children, who resumed his true name, which he made known in his last illness. His descendants are well known in New England, and the Dixwells are among the most respected Boston families.
I'm Mark Vinette, and I hope you're enjoying the ride.